So, Mr. Hitchcock, we're interviewing you today for the position of research fishery biologist. Is that correct? Yes. All right. We just got a couple of questions. Pretty standard stuff. Took a look at your resume, and we figured we'd take a couple of questions that were more specific to your expertise and some that were more generalized. The stuff we ask everyone. Yeah, no, completely understandable. Go fire away. I'm very excited to hear them. All right. Question number one. Let's get right into it. Skip the pleasantries. Are you familiar with our agency's mission statement? And if so, where do you think you fit in with it? What do you most appreciate, and what are you looking to improve upon in it? Well, the one of the things that I really noticed about it was that it said that, and I quote, blah, quote unquote, vision is to become the world's premier public engineering, environmental sciences, research, and developmental organizations. Now, my thought on this is that, well, I don't know if you've heard the story about the first napkin, but whenever a large dinner is hosted and seating isn't assigned, it's always the first person to take a napkin and declare their spot that decides where everyone else sits. And if we're number one, if we're the world's premier research, science, environmental sciences research center, I think that we have the opportunity to do that. So I very much appreciate that we'll be able to direct others and kind of set an example for what other organizations should do. Weird example, napkins. Don't really understand that, but we'll move on to number two. Just basic general, what, if any, experience do you have with large river systems? Because that is fundamental to this job. I did a bit of work with a grad student in the Pascagoula River system, looking at aquatic food webs, ecological studies, and whatnot. So we worked in certain oxbow lakes, different sections of the river, different sites, so to say. Aside from that, I'm a member of the AFS chapter here at Mississippi State, and I have also been lucky enough to attend the Southern Division meeting, which was very much enlightening. Met a lot of interesting people, heard a lot of interesting stories, got a lot of interesting facts and studies that are going on right now. Happy to be a part of that. Very much happy to be a part of that. That's quite good. I'm a member of the AFS myself. Although I'm with the University of Phoenix chapter, so, a little bit different vibe, but you get the gist. Next question. Have you conducted, if any, prior studies with organizations who work with our agency? No, I can't say that I have. Of course, the AFS itself and Mississippi State have done studies and research and worked hand in hand with the U.S. Army Engineering Research and Development Center. So, in that aspect, yes, but personally, no, I have not. Interesting. I don't want to say that puts you a step back, but you'll have to get more familiar with this eventually. Next question. Our research, our center, all of our staff are very fortunate that most of them don't have to work a typical 9 to 5 in the office space. The environment is just that. You're out in the world, you're out in nature, you're out on these large river basins and floodplains and whatnot. So one of the pleasant and also negative aspects of that is that you can't always 100% predict how things are going to work out, whether it be with the environment itself, weather, the animals, if you happen to be working with specific subjects, stuff like that. So please go ahead and describe a time in which you've had to shift your work plan based on the elements around you and the element of surprise and change mostly. Excuse me, pardon my French. Referring back to that research with the grad student, I won't name him. Great guy, Mr. Hallmark, we call him. He he'd been out there multiple times. I, however, of course, my first time, it was my first time, so I was not very knowledgeable. But I would say there was a bit of a problem with the weather. You gave that example, but we were expecting clear skies. We got up at 4:30 in the morning, not a cloud in the night sky. Very dark. As the day went on, grew brighter. Not a cloud, sun shining, picturesque. And then all of a sudden, just after we took a short break for lunch, pouring, absolutely just thunder booming everywhere. We had to compensate for that. The work that we did involved putting out a lot of gill nets, pike nets, and different traps, whether it be minnow or crawfish traps. And those, I don't know if you know, but I'll explain anyway. Please stop me if you do know. But you have to tie them or anchor them to a tree for the most part and spread them out so that way they cover a large area. As the waters rose, because that area was prone to flooding, the nets and the lines, even though they were fluorescent pink, became very hard to see from a distance as well as up close as they were submerged in the water now. So we had to work around that, change our lines out, raise them. A couple of them we had to cut short just because the islands that they were near were getting just engulfed by the water and just about impossible to see. So I would say working around that weather aspect is one thing. And then, like you said, the specimens themselves, I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times I've gone to pull up a pike net or some other kind of net, and there's been a gar, a bowfin, smiling with those big curly teeth, real funny, just waiting to snap at me. So, that's experience, being able to untangle the nets and work with them and handle them properly, apply that firm yet soft grip, as if you were holding a bird. That would certainly, I would say, answer your question. I would agree. That's a very good answer. Is there any reason why you have to touch your face so much in this interview? No, I'm just very expressive. I can't physically. The muscles in my face have been paralyzed, so I have to, actively move them to smile. It's a shame. All right, that was sad. I feel bad about asking that now. No harm, no foul. You'll learn. All right, let's move on, to the next topic. Next question. Let me just ask softball question. Underhand, real easy. What aspect of this job, this position as a research fishery biologist, would you look most forward to? That's an easy one, Jim. It's Mr. Jim, right? Don't worry about it. No, it's definitely, like you mentioned earlier, that not being in the typical 9 to 5 office space environment, but instead being out and working with those bowfin, those gar, darters, minnows, whatever it may be, and getting hands-on, really working with my hands is what I like most. And I think that a lot of jobs nowadays miss that aspect. I realize that it's very important, to be able to work in that office space, work on the computer, all of that, very important, very, very important. But being able to be done with a job at the end of the day, getting back off the river, out of the floodplain, wherever it may be, covered in mud and gar goop and whatever it may be, and knowing that I did good work is really what I love about it. Very, very fortunate. All right, and let's go ahead and wrap this up with our last question. Kind of a more introspective, not field related but general broad topic I just wanted to touch on. Uh, have you ever purposefully ignored the command of a superior in order to do what you thought to be right? Whether it be morally, financially, you can elaborate, of course, but if so, please explain. Well, I can't personally say that I have. I'm going to go ahead and say no, I haven't. I cannot recall in a work setting, at the very least, that I have. Growing up, maybe with my parents. Just as every young adult, teenager does. That rebellious spurt, but nothing too serious. No, I am willing to say that if I needed to, like you said, if it was morally justifiable, if it was the ethical thing to do, ignoring my superior and acting on whatever it was, I'd be more than willing to do that. Well, that's great to hear. We thrive on feedback here, and it's very important that we know that you know that not only can you follow orders for the most part, which you've explained, and the fact that you haven't, gone against these instructions so far, but being able to give us feedback, or at least if you were to act on your own, we know that it's explainable. We can come and talk to you personally, see what was going on, what your mindset was at that point, and what drove you to make that decision. So if that's going to be it, we can show you to the door. I have one question for you. Mr. Jim. What? I have a whole list of questions here, but I'll just make it very quick. Why didn't you ask that question about being shrunk down and put in a blender and how you would get out? Excuse me, the what? Well, it's just every interview I've ever been to, they always ask about, if you were a fruit, what would you be? If you were a smoothie, what would you be? If you were caught in a blender and you were the size of like an ant or whatever it was, how would you get out? What would you do? So on, etc., etc. I can say I've never once heard that question before, but now that you've brought it up, I don't know. That's an excellent question. Do you happen to know if there's a right answer to this question? Well, the only right answer is the one that they gave in the hit film starring Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson. Not the interview. What is it? Internship. The internship with them working at Google, where the supposed correct answer is that if you're very small, you're pound for pound strong enough to where it'd be very easy to just jump out. So I would imagine something like, if you're the size of a cricket, you just hop out because you got real strong legs. You jump out of a cricket for gosh darn sake. That's what you do. You make noise and you jump around. It's not much to it. Interesting answer, for sure. Interesting question. Glad to know that you're a big fan of Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson. Oh, no, sir. Just Vince Vaughn. All right, well, I didn't need to know that, but if that is all of your questions, then I'd say this is a successful interview. Thank you for coming in today. Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.